Welcome to the International Workshop on ELT in the Classroom, Academic and Professional Perspectives. We are doing this for the first time and we are very pleased to collaborate with the entire Hyderabad chapter. I must acknowledge the tremendous enthusiasm and assistance that we got from Professor Gunashekar of the English and Foreign Languages University. Without her guidance, I'm sure that we wouldn't have been able to organize this in such a short time. The English department or the humanities department in most technical institutions plays essentially a support role. But in our institution, we recognize the importance of humanities in general and English language skills in particular. Hence, it is mandatory for each of our students to do at least 3 humanities courses to graduate. So we offer elective courses in phonetics and spoken English, report writing, technical communication, advanced communication skills, effective public speaking, and a lot more courses in the areas of English literature. Faculty is also encouraged to apply for research grants. Research is a major emphasis here. And the university also supports international travel for attending important conferences. I think the job of the English language teacher becomes extremely challenging, I'm sure you would all agree with me, when the class has students from varied backgrounds. Most of the times, I think it is only in the final year of college that students and sometimes also management recognize the importance of the English language teacher. Because that's the time for campus placements. That's also the time when students would like to take up competitive exams. That's also the time when students want to apply for admission to universities abroad. And that's when the role of the English teacher, English language teacher, comes into sharp focus. We also hear from the industry very often that students could be very good at the technical skills, but when it comes to their language skills, there is some kind of a gap. And that needs to be filled, and there is always scope for improvement. And it is here that we as teachers of English need to play a proactive role. I hope that this workshop will enhance your skill sets to achieve the same. We would also like to take this initiative further and make this an annual affair. Hopefully Julie ma'am will help us take this further year after year. And I must acknowledge the support that we got from RELO, Regional English Language Organization of the US Embassy, and from the British Council. I welcome Vijay Lakshmi of the British Council. She's the head Business Development Examination Services for South India, and her colleague Munisha for coming all the way from Chennai and Delhi. I would also like to acknowledge the assistance that we got from Oxford University Press. We have as resource persons Blair Creamer Hart from RELO, US Embassy, Mr. Avinash Chimote, who heads recruitments in Japan, Sara Koshi of British Council, Mr. Adi Babu from Time, a premier coaching institute for competitive examinations, Professor Gunashekar and Dr. Kshema Jose from FU, Professor Sunita Mishra from Hyderabad Central University, and Mr. Shubham Das from DINED English Language Program. So thank you all for your support. I extend a very warm welcome to all the participants from various engineering colleges who have come from Telangana, Andhra Pradesh, Bangalore and other places. I am sure that you will have a very fruitful, very enjoyable time here. It also serves as a good networking opportunity, so make the best use of it. Today we have with us, in traditional terms, if I have to say, he is the Bhishma Pitamaha of language, English language. Is the most experienced of English language teachers and a senior professor, Dean Publications at FU, Professor Paul Gunashekar. He is our chief guest for the day and he is also the keynote speaker. We all know how tough it is to get one paper published, and here is a man who has published over 200 textbooks, in language, in English and related areas. And so it is indeed our proud privilege to have you with us here, sir. Thank you so much for accepting our request to be the keynote speaker. I now request my colleague Dr. Santosh Mahapatra to introduce the theme of the workshop. Thank you very much.
I welcome all of you to this workshop. I know we don't have many people around, but I hope the rest of the participants will join us in a while. We planned it much before, let's say 6 months ago, and we started thinking about this workshop because we saw there are a lot of gaps when it comes to addressing the English language needs of our students in the classroom, because the textbooks, I don't think they are sufficient, they adequately address the English language needs of our students, and they don't really fulfill the kind of help and support we need from them in addressing the workplace needs of students. This is very important. We are focusing in this entire workshop will focus on the workplace needs of students and how to address the needs in your classroom. So we have four major areas we are focusing. First one is English language textbooks and how to use them, how to evaluate the textbooks, how to use supplementary materials if required. And second part of our workshop will focus on how to integrate technology in the classroom. All of you have, may not be all of you, but most of you have access to labs, English language labs. And here in one of the workshops, Dr. Shema Jose will focus on how to integrate technology in the English language classroom. Then the third part of the workshop will focus on employability needs of students, which will be discussed, and we'll have a session by Blair Creamer-Hart, who will focus on this thing and will get to learn how to address employability skills, how to teach our students, how to make our students employable in our English language classroom. The fourth part of our workshop will focus on how to prepare our students for international standardized tests like IELTS and TOEFL, GRE, all those. So we have people from time and other institutes who will kind of tell us, and we will, through kind of hands-on experience, will learn how to integrate that kind of teaching towards preparing our students for international exams in our regular classroom. We are teaching LSRW skills. With that, how you can integrate their preparation for IELTS, TOEFL, GRE and all that. And I think it's a possibility. We can explore how possible, to what extent it's possible in this workshop. Your ideas will also help us because you are teachers, you are teaching in classroom, so you will actually, you have experience, you can tell us the problem areas and we'll try to address those problems through these workshops. It will be a kind of I hope we'll have a lot of productive exchange of ideas happening in these workshops in these 2 days. Thank you. Now I request Nikhil to present. Okay, Nikhil just. Now I request Professor Julus and ma'am to kind of introduce LTI to our participants and tell us. Please.
Good morning to all of you. LTI is an organization which was set up in Chennai initially, and now it has chapters all over India. We have about 50 chapters all over India. It is reaching out to teachers from schools, colleges, even primary school teachers, and we try to carry out workshops to bridge the gap between what they know and what they need to know. So when Santosh asked me whether we could organize a workshop here, I got interested in the area because At IFLU also we are tackling this gap between what the placement officers say that the students need, what the students say that they need, and what the companies need. So what the industries need, whether our students are job ready for the industry, we are facing the same problem at IFLU. Recently Amazon had come to interview our students, and they said that those who are from regional medium institutions, they are good in writing. Those who are from English medium institutions are good in speaking. But they're overconfident, and they wanted someone who could tackle multitasking jobs at their place, who have the corporate skills in their words. So what we felt is, even LTI feels that way, one institution can't solve the problem. In order to address such needs, we need to do a collaborative action research project along with other institutions like WITS, IFLU, University of Hyderabad, if we can get together, along with companies who come to interview our students, along with the placement officers, along with alumni who have been placed in those companies. What do they feel? Are they able to cope with the problems of reading, writing, or even discussions that they have in their workplace? So English at the workplace can't be solved by one institution alone. It has to be a joint effort along with other institutions and along with people who are there at the workplace and there at the other end of the institution. Therefore, English at the workplace, I mean a topic of this kind, LTI can reach out to find out who could be the companies, who could be the resource persons, who could be the alumni and the students who can come in and help. So we have given questionnaires, we are trying to conduct interviews. It is like an ongoing project. We have just started, and Santosh and I will share our experiences tomorrow about that. But what I am trying to say is, LTI would help any institution, not only WITS or not only IFLU. It would help any institution who would like to do a collaborative action research project of this kind. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I hope we have some idea about LTI. People who are not familiar, I think most of us are familiar with LTI. This gives us an idea for further collaboration with LTI. If you're interested, you can contact during the tea coffee hours. You can contact with Vilu ma'am and take it forward. Now, I have the privilege of introducing my teacher and former teacher and a mentor, Professor Gunashekar. He has been teaching English, training teachers in English, and developing instructional materials for language teaching for over 40 years. He is a professor in the Department of Materials Development, Testing and Evaluation at the English and Foreign Languages University, Hyderabad. He has authored, co-authored, edited over 200 ELT textbooks. I repeat, 200 ELT textbooks. Workbooks, supplementary readers, teachers' books, reading cards. And he specializes in course design, teacher development, and English for specific purposes. He edits the IFLU Research Journal, Languaging, and is the Indian consultant to the Oxford English Dictionary and Oxford Advanced Learners Dictionary. I welcome you, sir, and I request you to come and deliver the address. Thank you.
Can we move forward if you don't mind? Some of you, lots of empty chairs, why don't you move to the front? Professor Singh, Dr. Prasanna, Dr. Mahapatra, Dr. Tharu, ladies and gentlemen, it's such a pleasure being with you this morning. I'm privileged to be part of this workshop, jointly conducted by BITS Pilani and the Hyderabad chapter of LTI. So I'm particularly happy that the two organizations have come together to put this lovely workshop together. Dr. Prasanna has given me 30 to 35 minutes to make this presentation. To make it easier for myself, I actually prepared my little address, so I should be taking about 30 minutes. It's a prepared address, so most of it I'm going to be reading it out to you. So I crave your indulgence. I'm basically going to be talking about a curriculum for teaching English in college with specific reference to the textual content, because as Santosh said, one of the main themes of this workshop is looking at textbooks in use at the college level in institutions like BITS. So I thought I'll take a second look at some issues of curriculum and textbooks and talk about related matters too, like employability. In a BBC OUP lecture, jointly organized by the BBC and OUP, Mark Tully, I'm sure you're familiar with that intrepid Englishman who's become an Indian, when he spoke at the English Speaking Union in 1996, he said, and I quote, "I would suggest that the golden rule is don't oversell English. It is in the interests of English that it reaches an accommodation with those Indians who at present regard it with the deepest suspicion, those who are not members of the elite club," Kali said. Obviously, there is a risk in suggesting measures to arrest what people call deteriorating standards of English in India and addressing curricular initiatives in language teaching in a country where English is regarded, at least in some quarters, as an instrument of linguistic imperialism and social intimidation. Propriety therefore suggests that the obviously stated in a muted tone, there is a correlation between an acknowledged proficiency in English and professional empowerment. And that, in a sense, is the theme of this workshop. So I'll attempt a presentation on curricular concerns in language teaching, with particular reference to the textual content in English course books, which will necessarily be personal and subjective, although all along I'll try and remember T.S. Eliot's famous dictum, the critic should endeavor to discipline his personal prejudices and cranks. A long time ago, a few years after independence actually, the report of the University Education Commission of 1950-51 stated, "English cannot continue to occupy the place of state language as in the past. The use of English as such divides the people into two nations, the few who govern and the many who are governed, the one unable to talk the language of the other and mutually uncomprehending. This is a negation of democracy," said that report. Such criticism flowed from the fear that a marked preference for English in governance and education would alienate Indians from their cultural roots and reduce their esteem for their own languages, which eventually would lead to cultural atrophy, it was felt. Notwithstanding this fear of linguistic expansionism, the facts perhaps are quite different. English in India today has multiple dimensions with regard to status and functions, and I list half a dozen of them. One, a conservative estimate of the English-speaking bilingual population in India is approximately 5%. But remember, 5% in India is a staggering 60 million. Indeed, this figure is likely to increase quite rapidly in the near future. David Dolby, the author of Lingosphere, Register of the World's Languages and Speech Communities, had predicted at the turn of the century that based on prevalent trends, India would emerge as the largest English-speaking nation in the world, and that it would consequently become, to quote him, the center of gravity of the English language. 2. There is a growing segment of Indian writers who use English as their medium of expression and who have found a burgeoning market both in India and in English-speaking countries. To many in this segment, English has become their first language. 3. There is now a consensus in Indian society that English is the chief gateway to relevant knowledge, economic resurgence, and upward socio-economic mobility. English-speaking Indian bilinguals, as everyone in BITS Pilani is, constitute one of the largest pools of scientific and technical manpower in the world. Not surprisingly, English medium schools are mushrooming not just in India, but also in those parts of the world where there are Indian expatriates. 4. With the inexorable spread of globalization, Indian industry and business have been attracting a significant number of foreign investors. The role of English as the dominant language of business communication has been strengthened with the arrival in India of multinational companies like Sony, Honda, Suzuki, Hyundai, etc. from the Far East, and Microsoft, Google, Coca-Cola, Vodafone, etc. from the West. 5. The constitutionally mandated use of English as an associate official language of the country has ensured that its place on the panel of languages in the national three-language formula that operates at the school level. It has also led to English being used as the official link language between the central government and the governments of the non-Hindi speaking states, and as the language favored by the legal and banking systems, trade and commerce, defense and tourism, and in our immediate context, science and technology. Clearly, English has important intra-national functions. 6. Socio-political pressure has led to English being introduced as a subject of study from the earliest levels in primary school in most Indian states now, including those that have traditionally been distrustful of the language. Indeed, the ruling party of an eastern state, West Bengal, Julu's home state, nearly lost the elections 10 years ago because it refused to introduce English from class 1 in the government schools. Evidently, stakeholders in the vast government-run schooling system in India are beginning to assert themselves. Let me take this forward by underlining the importance of positioning language and language learning in the larger area of education. Can we design a language curriculum that will enlarge the human capacities of college learners of English in addition to sharpening their language skills? It might help in this regard to recall the 3 key elements in curriculum design that the educational psychologist Jerome Bruner emphasized. Bruner, in his landmark book, The Process of Education, published in 1960, said, 1, that learning is in good measure a social process by which learners and teachers can articulate and share ideas. 2, that competence in the use of language will lead learners to increased self-confidence and comprehension of their operating assumptions about life. 3, that the world can be observed, conjectured about, and to some degree ordered and understood using the tool of language, and that an individual life can be viewed as part of the larger flow of human existence. Using Brunner's philosophy as the backdrop, let me briefly refer to 5 cardinal principles of a language curriculum that are of relevance to the teaching of English at the tertiary level. 1. Focus on the learner. Curriculum development should put learners first, recognizing and building on their knowledge and experience, and responding to their needs. Different learning styles as well as pace of learning need to be acknowledged and accommodated, both in learning contexts and in the attainment of language proficiency. 2. Creativity. Learners need to be encouraged to formulate and express their own ideas rather than be coerced into converging on their English teachers' views all the time. I'm thinking only of the English classroom. The emphasis should be on the selection of texts and creation of materials that will promote what is often referred to as divergent thinking. It follows that the perception of teachers as dispensers of knowledge will need to change to one where learners are valued as equals in the language classroom. 3. Intellectual development. Learners should be provided a platform to chisel their thinking and urged to make meaningful responses in the language classroom to issues of national concern. The issues themselves, for instance, can be chosen from the common core elements specified in the National Policy on Education, published in 1986, and which is still our national document for education. India's freedom movement, constitutional obligations, national identity, India's common cultural heritage, egalitarianism, democracy and secularism, equality of sexes, protection of the environment, removal of social barriers, observance of the small family norm, and inculcation of a scientific temper in the community. Essentially, the purpose is to use textual content to remove prejudices and stereotypes that have been transmitted through the social environment and the accident of birth. 4. Self-dependence. Learners should be trained to take responsibility for their own learning so that they can move smoothly from a marked dependence on the English teacher to a level of autonomy where reading for profit and pleasure and self-study habits in particular have been firmly established. The need to refer to the immense range of reference materials now available in this library itself, from the dictionary to the internet, should be stressed. And number 5, liberality. Learners should be persuaded to regard English not merely as a utilitarian acquisition, but also as a major contributor to personal development and as a valuable tool for understanding India's pluralistic society. And that, I assume, is the main reason why students of BITS Pilani Hyderabad campus have been encouraged to choose a series of courses from social sciences and the humanities. They need to recognize the significance of using the language to develop a mutual respect for diverse religious and value systems and varied cultural and language traditions. Textual content should therefore reiterate the mutual interdependence of humans, as somebody said, and reinforce Rabindranath Tagore's ideal that we achieve our greatest happiness when we realize ourselves through others. In this regard, it is worth considering the major recommendations of the National Curriculum Framework of 2005 and their relevance to the teaching of English and the development of appropriate language teaching materials. And I list a few. A language course is likely to be effective when the emphasis is on integrated teaching, in which institutional subjects are combined into learning areas and taught thematically. For example, the course in English can be used to emphasize environmental concerns at all stages of language education. A language course should give prominence to the knowledge that learners bring to the classroom, that is everyday knowledge, and its relevance to institutional knowledge that is developed in an educational setting, as in this particular institution. This means that the language teacher's job includes modifying, extending, or elaborating the schemata that learners bring to the classroom. Learners should develop a sense of self-worth. They need to experience acceptance, irrespective of what language they speak, what religious convictions they have, and which gender, class, caste, or ethnic group they belong to. The textual content of teaching materials should therefore include topics and themes that reflect cultural sensitivity. Learners should be encouraged to recognize the uniqueness of India's multiculturalism and linguistic pluralism. Classroom materials should engage learners affectively as well as cognitively. That is, they should provide opportunities for personalization and extrapolation. And lastly, there should be a greater emphasis on an English across the curriculum approach. The horizontal or lateral links that English establishes across of institutional subjects, as in this institutions, should be strengthened by, for instance, incorporating the salient features of environmental studies in every book of an English course. Two issues remain before I make an explicit reference to the textual content of English textbooks. One, if we had the choice, what approach to language teaching would we wish to adopt? And two, what is likely to be the role of the teacher of English in the changed educational dispensation? What approach to language teaching should we choose? While describing that very famous Hawaii English program in 1980, Ted Rogers made a distinction between what he called atomistic and holistic approaches to language skills development. At one extreme, the atomistic extreme, the process of language skills development is atomistic. This is analogous, he said, to building a mosaic. In mosaic building, each tile has to be color selected, shaped, and fitted to the existing tiles. While the finished mosaic can be appreciated as a whole, it is also describable as a set of minute, discrete elements, each finely shaped and fitted to the others. Language is therefore seen as a set of such discrete entities, morphemes, words, phrases, clauses, sentences, all fitted into a composite. The shaping and assembly of the elements is rational and incremental. The whole is in fact the sum of the individual parts. At the other extreme, the holistic extreme, the process of language development might be compared to Michelangelo's view of stone sculpting. Michelangelo, in the 16th century, claimed that the finished figures were obvious to him as he gazed at uncut blocks in the quarries of Carrara. He looked at sculpting as releasing the figures from the marble for others to see by the process of discarding unwanted stone. Language can similarly be seen as a universal and idealized form which lies beneath the surface features of a particular realization called, say, English. Learning English then becomes a process of getting in touch with a new surface realization of an already known underlying form. And those associated with this view of language development are committed to holistic learning, a language-rich environment, and learning by doing. Three concepts, incidentally, that are highlighted in XCF 2005. Implicit in this theory of learning, language learning, is that language is fundamentally an instrument in communication or instrument of communication characterized by variable relationships between form and function, and that language use is a dynamic process of negotiating and sharing of meaning. What implications does a new improved language curriculum have for the teacher of English? Let's think of teacher models on a continuum. At one end, we have the omniscient teacher, Mr. Know-all or Ms. Know-all, whose main responsibility is the transmission of information. This kind of teacher belongs to what the famous philosopher Paulo Freire, the proponent of the emancipatory approach to education, called the banking school of education. Freire, in his landmark publication, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, published in 1970, while criticizing schooling practices, said, famous quotation, "Education becomes an art of depositing in which the students are the depositories and the teacher is the depositor. Instead of communicating, the teacher issues communiques and makes deposits which the students patiently receive, memorize, and repeat." Unquote. At the other end of the continuum, we have the teacher as a critical investigator and problem solver. In this model, the teacher is a professional who can analyze an educational situation, devise a program of action, operationalize the program, and monitor and evaluate the program. Clearly, this model suggests that teaching is a multifaceted and complex phenomenon, and that the teacher's interaction with other stakeholders is at the core of curriculum development. While referring to the changed role of the English teacher in the 80s, in the context of the then new University of Malaya English for Special Purposes project, one of the most famous CSP projects in the world, Nesamala Chitravelu, who led the project, remarked, and I quote, "Most important of all, the teacher-student relationship is changed. The teacher's role is still crucial, but not in the way it was before. The teacher is no longer the sole repository of knowledge and the uncontestable judge of rightness. The teacher, like the material, is essential only in the way infrastructure is necessary for economic development. The role of the teacher is to interpret and adapt the material so as to maximize individual and group learning." The press release in 1995 for the launch of the British Council's English 2000 project, and included in David Graddell's 1997 book, The Future of English, summarized the position of English. Worldwide, there are over 1,400 million people living in countries where English has official status. 1 out of 5 of the world's population speaking English to some level of competence. Demand from the other 4/5 is increasing. By the year 2000, it is estimated that over 1 billion people will be learning English. And in its sequel, English Next, which incidentally was launched when we were the Central Institute of English and Foreign Languages in 2006, David Gradle said, many difficult to anticipate factors will affect exactly when the demand for learning English will peak, but it could be very soon. At that point, we can expect around 2 billion people to be learning English, all requiring teachers, textbooks, and teaching materials. The year, ladies and gentlemen, is 2016, and the figures are intimidating. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. And we all think about English as something different from other languages. Generally we don't place English language teaching in a multilingual context. Though all of us are aware of it, but we don't emphasize enough to push this fact of placing English language teaching in a multilingual context, and not to push for English only kind of approach. That's a little unfair. And thanks for emphasizing it and reminding us to be on the right track. I now request my head professor, Poona ma'am, to present bouquet, and then it goes to Professor Paul Gunashekar sir and Professor Julu Sen.
Thank you very much, sir. I acknowledge the presence of Blair. Thank you so much, Blair, and Mr. Avilash Chimote, Shubham, and my friends from the British Council, Vijay Lakshmi and her colleague Manisha. Thank you so much for being here. We'll all quickly go down to the entrance of the library for a quick group picture, and then come back here for some coffee and networking. Thank you so much.
Very hard. Let's go. You can map. So,